Mr. Bawumia, you are representing the African continent. So my question is, how is the weaponization of trade affecting the African economies, particularly Ghana, and what strategies are being considered to strengthen the economic resilience of the African continent?
Thank you very much. I don't know if everyone can hear me. Let's put this in a broader context. I think that one of the things that policymakers are doing recently is a failure to understand the lessons of history as well as the lessons of economics. There are surely trade imbalances. If you look at the share of global trade in terms of exports and imports, Africa has about 2.5% of global exports, has 2.9% of global imports. Asia has 43% of global exports and 38% of global imports. China, 15% of exports, 10% of imports. Europe, you have 38% of exports and 51% of imports. America, 8% of exports and 14% of imports. So there are clearly trade imbalances across the various continents and countries. But what we know from economics is that you cannot fix a trade deficit with tariffs. It just doesn't work. I mean, if you look at the national income identity, where you say that your income is equals to your consumption, investment, government spending plus exports minus imports, that breaks down into a simple equation, which is a truism, that your deficit, the exports minus your imports, would necessarily have to equal the difference between your savings and investment. So for any country which spends more than it saves, you're going to get a trade deficit. The deficit is a macroeconomic problem. It's not a trade policy issue. And you cannot solve that macroeconomic problem with trade policy like tariffs. So you go back, to the Smoot-Hawley Acts of the 1930s, where they put 20% tariffs. You had a Great Depression. And that is what happened recently with China and the US, 2018, 2019. Again, we had the impact, which was negative for global trade. What the US has done recently is increase the average tariff rate from about 2.4% to 10%. This is the largest increase in tariffs since 1943. And the impact will not be small. It will not be insignificant. Thankfully for Africa, our exports to the United States is about 6.5%. And our imports from the United States is about 4.4%. So we are not as exposed in the broader sense as many other places. But within that context, countries like Lesotho, which have exports in terms of textile exports to the United States, it's about 50% of their exports. And they are benefiting from the African Growth and Opportunities Act, which is AGOA. And these countries are going to be affected very significantly. When you have 50% of your exports, and AGOA is basically going to collapse under these tariffs. So what you're going to see in Africa, as you're seeing across the world, there's going to be more of a clamor and for self-reliance. And you're going to see a bit more of political space for countries to have more intra-African trade as a way of dealing with this. Currently, our intra-African trade is between 17 and 20%. But I think that as you see a more relook at supply chains within the continent and globally, you're going to see, as you see in Europe, there's an increasing sense that, there's been a decoupling of the US-European relationship. And Europe is going to look at its supply chains again as every other player in this world is going to do. And so Africa is going to look at our supply chains again as a way of looking at it. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that the macro balances are the ones guiding your trade policy and not tariffs. The tariff rates are not the ones that actually determine the effectiveness of your deficit outcomes.
Mr. Bawumia, I'd like to come back to you and also address China and its role in the African continent. As we know, the role of China in Africa is growing. Do you see African countries deepening trade ties with China in response to rising global protectionism, or are we more likely to see some sort of push for diversification, including partnerships with Europe and possibly other regions as well?
Thank you very much. I think that if you look at what has happened, the whole rules-based order has been disrupted. And there has been a lot of, and there is ongoing, a lot of realignment. I mean, old allies are no longer being seen as allies. And so what has been injected in the whole system is uncertainty and the lack of predictability. And so partnerships are no longer as straightforward as they used to be. China has a major trade participation in Africa. In Ghana, for example, China is our largest trading partner as well as our largest foreign investor. And it is the same for many countries. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. But African countries are going to look at what works for them and diversify accordingly, because the rules-based order, as I said, is something that no longer really exists at the moment, and we have to work back towards that. But as I said, for us on the continent, there has to be a major play for self-reliance in a lot of ways, so that it's not necessarily China or America or Europe, but you've got to really look at your own internal economic dynamics and bring in more value addition to our raw materials so that you can create jobs for the youth. And so the issue is not east or west, or it's just going forward with Africa for us. Yeah.
With this, I have a closing question to all of the panelists. In 4 years, what would be more important, tariffs or trust? I'm asking about trust because trust is important in politics, in trade, everywhere. So what's your take on it?
For me, I think that trust is going to be more important than tariffs. Tariffs are not going to be sustainable, and we will soon all find out that it's a rush to the lowest common denominator. I think that the evidence that we have over history shows that tariffs don't work. But what we don't have now is trust. I mean, people talk about mutually assured destruction for nuclear powers, but today what you have is mutually assured suspicions across the countries, because Europe is very suspicious of Russia, the US is very suspicious of China, Australia is very suspicious of China. Now, when you have to negotiate trade agreements of security threats at the background, the efficiency with which you will negotiate them will be compromised, because you are thinking security. And if I agree that, okay, I'll take off these barriers, maybe I might compromise my security. And so we need, at the diplomatic level, to address why is this suspicion. Can we deal with this suspicion between the major powers? And I don't think that I think that if you don't deal with this, you will have suboptimal trade policies in the end, because they are really a cover for dealing with the security issues.
Thank you.
So trust becomes fundamental.